It was a cold, stormy night in the small coastal town, the kind of night where the wind howled like it had secrets to share, and the rain hammered down on rooftops as if trying to remind everyone they were alive. Evelyn Harper, a woman in her late 50s with silver streaks running through her dark hair, was walking home after picking up groceries from the local store. Her umbrella struggled against the gusts of wind, but she didn't mind. She liked these quiet moments when the world seemed to pause, even if just for a little while. Evelyn wasn't one for big adventures or flashy lifestyles. She lived simply, finding joy in tending to her garden, volunteering at the community shelter, and mentoring troubled teens who needed someone to believe in them. Life hadn't been easy for her. She'd lost her husband years ago, and raising their daughter alone had come with its own set of challenges. But Evelyn had learned to find beauty in the broken pieces of life. She believed that no matter how heavy things got, there was always room for kindness, always a way to help someone else carry their burden. As she approached the old pier jutting out into the ocean, something caught her eye. At first, she thought it might be debris tossed around by the storm. But then she saw him, a man sitting on the edge of the pier, his legs dangling over the side, staring blankly into the churning waters below. His shoulders were slumped, his posture weighed down by an invisible force. The sight sent a chill down Evelyn's spine. Something about the way he sat told her this wasn't just someone seeking solitude. This was someone teetering on the edge, not just of the pier, but of something far more dangerous. Her heart raced as she hesitated for a moment. Should she approach him? What if he didn't want to be disturbed? But Evelyn had spent years nursing people back to health, both physically and emotionally. She knew better than most that sometimes all it took was one person reaching out to pull someone back from the brink. Taking a deep breath, she tightened her grip on her grocery bag and stepped closer. "Excuse me," she called out gently, her voice barely audible over the sound of the waves crashing against the wooden beams beneath them. "Are you okay?" The man didn't turn around immediately. For a second, Evelyn wondered if he'd even heard her. Then slowly, he glanced over his shoulder. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, like all the light had been drained from them. He looked exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. There was a sadness in his gaze that made Evelyn's chest tighten. "I'm fine," he muttered, though his tone said otherwise. Evelyn wasn't convinced. She took another cautious step forward, careful not to startle him. "You don't look fine," she said softly, keeping her voice calm and steady. "Would you mind if I joined you for a minute?" He hesitated, studying her as if trying to decide whether she posed a threat or not. Finally, he gave a slight nod, shifting slightly to make space for her. Evelyn sat down beside him, placing her grocery bag between them. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds coming from the storm raging around them. "You know," Evelyn began after a while, breaking the quiet, "I used to come here when I was younger. Whenever life felt too heavy, I'd sit right here and watch the waves. It's funny. You'd think looking at something so vast would make your problem seem bigger. But somehow it does the opposite. Makes you realize how small we are in the grand scheme of things." The man didn't respond right away. Instead, he continued staring into the water, his expression unreadable. Evelyn waited patiently, sensing that pressing him wouldn't do any good. Sometimes people just needed time to open up, especially when they were carrying pain as heavy as the one this man seemed to be holding on to. Eventually he spoke, his voice low and rough. "Do you ever feel like nothing matters anymore? Like no matter what you do, it won't change anything?" Evelyn turned to look at him, her heart aching at the raw vulnerability in his words. "I've felt that way before," she admitted, honestly. "More times than I can count, actually. Losing my husband, raising my daughter alone. There were days when it felt like the weight of everything would crush me. But you know what kept me going?" He finally met her gaze, curiosity flickering in his tired eyes. "What?" "The thought that maybe, just maybe, I could still make a difference," Evelyn replied. "Even if it's just for one person, even if it's just for a moment, that's enough reason to keep going, isn't it?" For the first time since she'd arrived, The man cracked the tiniest of smiles. It was fleeting, barely noticeable, but it was there, and that was enough for Evelyn to know she was getting through to him. They talked for a while longer, the conversation slow and halting at first, but gradually becoming more natural. By the time they parted ways, Evelyn had convinced him to come back to her house for tea. As they walked together under the same umbrella, neither of them realized how much this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. The man followed Evelyn to her modest home, a cozy little house surrounded by wildflowers and ivy-covered walls. The storm outside raged on, but inside the atmosphere was warm and inviting. Evelyn flicked on the lights and motioned for him to sit at the kitchen table while she busied herself making tea. She pulled out 2 mismatched mugs from the cupboard, one chipped at the rim, the other faded with age, and placed them on the counter. "Sugar? Milk?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder as she filled the kettle with water. He shook his head slightly, still looking dazed, like he wasn't quite sure how he'd ended up here. "Just plain is fine," he murmured. Evelyn nodded and set about, preparing the tea, humming softly under her breath. She didn't push him to talk. Instead, she let the silence settle between them, giving him space to breathe. After a few minutes, the kettle whistled, and she poured steaming water into the mugs, adding a couple of tea bags before sliding one across the table toward him. "Here you go," she said with a small smile. "It's nothing fancy, but it does the trick." He wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. For a long moment, he stared into the swirling liquid, as if searching for answers in its depths. Then finally he spoke. "I don't even know why I'm telling you this," he began hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But my daughter died recently. A car accident. She was only 23. His words hung heavy in the air, raw and unfiltered. Evelyn felt her heart clench painfully. She reached across the table and placed a gentle hand over his. "I'm so sorry," she said sincerely. "That must be unbearable." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Her name was Emily. She was everything to me, my world, and now—" His voice cracked, and he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Evelyn waited silently, giving him time to gather himself. When he looked up again, his eyes were glistening with unshed tears. "I wasn't there for her enough," he admitted, guilt etched into every line of his face. "I worked too much, chased success, thought I could make it all up to her later. But now there is no later, there's just emptiness." Evelyn listened intently, her own heart aching for this stranger who had lost so much. She knew what it was like to carry regret, to replay moments in your mind and wish you could turn back time. Gently, she squeezed his hand. "We all have regrets," she said softly. "I do too. Losing someone doesn't mean those regrets disappear. They stay with us, haunting us. But maybe they can also remind us of what truly matters, of how precious life is even when it hurts." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. There was something about her calm demeanor, her genuine concern, that made him feel safe, like he could lower his guard without fear of judgment. Slowly, he began to open up more, sharing fragments of his story. He told her about Emily, the way she used to laugh, the dreams she had for her future, the times they spent together that now seemed both fleeting and eternal. He talked about the guilt gnawing at him, the sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, wondering if he could have done something differently. And he confessed the darkest truth of all, that some days he didn't see the point in going on anymore. Evelyn listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally or offering a quiet word of understanding. When he paused, she shared a bit of her own story, not to overshadow his pain, but to show him he wasn't alone. "I lost my husband years ago," she said, her voice steady despite the memories flooding back. "It was sudden, a heart attack. One day he was there and the next, he wasn't. I blamed myself for a long time. Thought I should have noticed the signs, done more to take care of him. It nearly destroyed me." She took a sip of her tea, collecting her thoughts before continuing. "But you know what kept me going? Helping others? Volunteering at the shelter, mentoring kids who needed guidance, it gave me a reason to get out of bed each morning. It reminded me that even though I couldn't fix the past, I could still make a difference in the present. The man listened intently, his expression shifting ever so slightly. There was a spark of curiosity in his eyes now, as if her words had planted a seed of hope where none had existed before. "You're stronger than you think," Evelyn added gently, "and you're not alone. Whatever you're feeling right now, it's okay. It's part of grieving, but it doesn't have to define you forever." Over the next hour, their conversation flowed more freely. They talked about loss, love, and the messy, complicated nature of being human. By the time the storm outside began to subside, the tension in the room had lifted somewhat. The man looked less like a ghost of himself and more like someone beginning to find his footing again. Before he left, Evelyn handed him a small notebook she kept by the phone. "If you ever need to talk, or even if you just want company, you know where to find me," she said with a reassuring smile. "Promise me you'll reach out if things get too heavy." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything." As he walked away into the damp night air, Evelyn watched from the doorway, her heart full of hope. She didn't know his name, nor did she expect to see him again. But deep down she believed she had planted a tiny seed of light in his darkness, and sometimes that was enough to start a change. Little did Evelyn know, this chance encounter would lead to a friendship unlike any other. Over the weeks that followed, the man returned to her doorstep several times, always bringing new pieces of his story with him. Each visit brought them closer, weaving threads of trust and understanding between them. Evelyn never pushed him to reveal more than he was ready to share, but she encouraged him to keep moving forward step by step. Through their conversations, she learned that he was struggling not just with grief, but with a sense of purposelessness. He had achieved immense success in his career, yet none of it brought him comfort anymore. Success felt hollow without someone to share it with. One day, as they sat together in her garden, he confided in her about his work. "I built an empire," he said almost bitterly. "But what good is it if I can't use it to bring Emily back? If I can't undo the mistakes I made?" Evelyn tilted her head thoughtfully. "Maybe you can't change the past," she replied. "But you can honor her memory. Use what you've built to help others, to create something meaningful that she would be proud of." Her words lingered in his mind long after he left that day. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of possibility, a glimmer of light breaking through the shadows. And though he didn't realize it yet, Evelyn had already started to guide him toward a path of healing, one small step at a time. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The man started showing up at Evelyn's house more often, not just for tea or conversation, but to join her in the little acts of kindness she did around town. At first he was hesitant, unsure if he belonged in her world of volunteering and community service. But Evelyn had a way of making people feel needed, like they mattered no matter who they were or where they came from. One Saturday morning, Evelyn invited him to tag along as she served meals at the local homeless shelter. He agreed, though part of him wondered if he'd stick out like a sore thumb among the volunteers. When they arrived, the bustling energy of the shelter surprised him. People moved quickly between tables, dishing out food, handing out blankets, and chatting with visitors who came seeking help. It wasn't glamorous work. It was messy, chaotic even, but there was an undeniable warmth in the air. Evelyn handed him an apron and pointed him toward the serving line. "Just scoop the mashed potatoes into bowls and hand them over," she instructed with a grin. "You'll do great." For the first hour, he felt awkward, fumbling with the ladle and avoiding eye contact with the people coming through the line. But then something shifted. A young boy, no older than 10, approached him with a shy smile and held out his bowl. Their eyes met briefly, and the man found himself smiling back instinctively. "Thank you," the boy said softly before moving, on to the next station. That simple exchange stayed with him throughout the day, By the time they finished cleaning up, he realized he hadn't thought about his own pain once during those hours. Instead, he'd been focused on helping others, and it had felt good. Really good. The following week, Evelyn took him to the library, where she helped organize book drives for underprivileged kids. They spent the afternoon sorting through stacks of donated books, stacking them neatly on shelves, and creating colorful displays to attract young readers. As they worked side by side, Evelyn noticed how much lighter he seemed. His movements were less stiff, his laughter more frequent. "You're a natural at this," she teased, as he carefully arranged a row of picture books. "Maybe we should put you in charge of children's literature." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't think I'm cut out for that, but I like being here. Feels like I'm doing something worthwhile." "That's all any of us can hope for," Evelyn replied warmly, "to make someone else's day a little brighter, even if it's just one person." Her words stuck with him long after they left the library. That night, lying awake in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, he could find purpose again. Not in the flashy achievements of his past, but in the quiet, everyday moments of connection and service. As the weeks turned into months, Evelyn introduced him to more projects around town. Together they painted walls at the community center, planted trees in the park, and organized a clothing drive for families struggling to make ends meet. Each activity brought its own challenges, but also its own rewards. Slowly, the man began to see the impact his efforts were having, not just on others but on himself. One particularly memorable day, they visited the senior living facility near Evelyn's house. She had been volunteering there for years, reading stories to the residents and keeping them company. The man tagged along nervously, unsure of what to expect, but within minutes of arriving, he was drawn into conversations with the elderly residents, listening to their life stories and sharing bits of his own. An older woman named Margaret pulled him aside after lunch and thanked him for spending time with her. "It gets lonely here sometimes," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "But days like today remind me that there are still good people in the world." Her gratitude hit him hard, leaving him speechless. Later, as they walked back to Evelyn's car, he turned to her and said, "I never realized how much I needed this, how much they need this." Evelyn smiled knowingly. Everyone needs to feel seen, heard, valued. Doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, young or old. We all want to know we matter. Her words resonated deeply with him. For so long he'd measured his worth by his bank account, his accomplishments, the size of his empire. But now, surrounded by people whose lives were touched simply because he showed up, he began to understand that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars and cents. It was measured in the connections we made and the love we shared. Unbeknownst to Evelyn, the man's presence in town was starting to leave a bigger mark than she realized. Though he never mentioned it to her, he began funneling resources into the projects they worked on together. New equipment appeared at the community center seemingly overnight. The library received a generous donation that allowed them to expand their collection and host educational workshops. The homeless shelter received funding to renovate its kitchen and add more beds. When Evelyn asked about these changes, the man shrugged casually. "Guess someone decided to step up," he said with a nonchalant smile. "Good thing, too. These places deserve all the support they can get." Evelyn didn't question it further. To her, it didn't matter who was behind the improvements. What mattered was that they were happening. Still, she couldn't help but notice how often coincidences aligned with their volunteer efforts. Every project they tackled seemed to gain momentum overnight, as if guided by some unseen force. Despite his growing involvement in the community, the man remained humble and reserved. He rarely spoke about his background or his wealth, preferring instead to focus on the tasks at hand. Evelyn admired this quality in him, the ability to blend in without drawing attention to himself. To her, he was simply a kindred spirit, someone who understood the importance of giving back. One evening, as they sat together on her porch watching the sunset, he turned to her and said, "I owe you a lot, you know. More than I can ever repay." Evelyn, waved off his comment with a laugh. Nonsense, you don't owe me anything. If anything, I should thank you. You've brought so much positivity to this town. He shook his head, his expression serious. No, really. You saved me. When I was ready to give up, you reminded me why I should keep going. And now I feel like I have a reason to wake up every morning. His honesty caught her off guard, but she didn't shy away from it. Instead, she reached over and patted his hand. We save each other in different ways, she said gently. That's what makes life beautiful. They sat in comfortable silence after that, letting the golden hues of the setting sun wash over them. In that moment, neither of them knew what the future held, but they both felt a sense of peace knowing they were exactly where they were meant to be. Months had passed since that stormy night on the pier, and the man felt like a different person. The weight of his grief hadn't disappeared entirely. It still lingered in quiet moments, tugging at the corners of his heart, but it no longer consumed him. He had found solace in helping others in the simple act of showing up and making a difference, however small. Evelyn had shown him that even in the darkest times there was light to be shared, and he clung to that truth with everything he had. But as much as he cherished their friendship and the work they did together, he knew it was time to face the reality of his life beyond this small coastal town. His responsibilities were calling, business meetings, board decisions, and obligations that couldn't wait forever. Still, leaving Evelyn behind felt impossible. How could he walk away from the woman who had saved him when he needed it most? Before he left, he wanted to do something meaningful to thank her, not just for what she'd done, but for who she was. One evening, after a long day of volunteering at the community center, Evelyn noticed the man seemed unusually quiet. They were sitting on her porch, sipping tea and watching the stars come out one by one. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of salt water from the nearby ocean. You've been awfully thoughtful today, Evelyn remarked, breaking the silence. Something on your mind? He hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I think it's time for me to head back home, he said finally, his voice tinged with both resolve and sadness. I can't stay here forever as much as I wish I could. Evelyn set her cup down and looked at him, her expression soft but understanding. Of course. You have a life waiting for you elsewhere, and you've already done so much good here. You've made such a difference. That's because of you, he replied earnestly. You showed me how to live again. Without you, I don't know where I'd be right now. Evelyn smiled, brushing off his compliment with a wave of her hand. Oh, stop it. You're the one who chose to take those steps forward. All I did was nudge you along a little. No, he insisted, leaning forward slightly. It's more than that. You gave me purpose when I didn't think I had any left. You reminded me what it means to care about something bigger than myself, and I'll never forget that. There was a pause, the kind of heavy silence that comes before someone says something important. Finally, he spoke again, his tone firmer this time. Before I go, I want to do something for you, something meaningful. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but wary. What are you talking about? I want to take you to dinner, he said simply. Somewhere nice, just the two of us. Think of it as my way of saying thank you. Evelyn laughed, shaking her head. Dinner? That's sweet, but unnecessary. We eat together all the time. This will be different, he promised. Trust me. Though she wasn't convinced, Evelyn agreed to go along with it. After all, how bad could a meal be? The restaurant he chose was unlike anything Evelyn had ever experienced. Located on a cliff overlooking the sea, it was elegant yet understated, with warm lighting and soft music playing in the background. When they arrived, Evelyn couldn't help but marvel at the view. The waves crashing against the rocks below, the moonlight dancing across the water. This place is incredible, she murmured as they were seated at a table near the window. How did you find it? It's one of my favorites, he admitted with a sheepish grin. I thought you deserved something special. As they perused the menu, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to be different. There was a weight in the air, a sense that something significant was about to happen. She pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on enjoying the evening. Over dinner, they talked about everything and nothing, their favorite books, childhood memories, silly pet peeves. For a while, it felt like any other night they'd spent together. But as dessert arrived, the man grew quieter, his expression serious. "Evelyn," he began, setting his fork down. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you a long time ago." Her brow furrowed, concern flickering in her eyes. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I'm not just some guy passing through town. My name is Daniel Grayson, and I'm a billionaire." For a moment, Evelyn stared at him, uncomprehending. Then she burst out laughing. "Oh, come on, you almost had me there." "No, I'm serious," he insisted, his tone grave. "Everything I've done, the donations, the improvements around town, it's all been me. Anonymous gifts, yes, but they came from me." Evelyn's laughter faded as she realized he wasn't joking. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "Wait, you're telling me you're the one behind all of that?" He nodded slowly. "I wanted to honor your spirit of generosity, to amplify the amazing work you're already doing. I didn't want to say anything earlier because I didn't want things to change between us, but now, I feel like you deserve to know." Evelyn sat back in her chair, overwhelmed by the revelation. She had suspected, of course, that someone wealthy must have been funding the projects they worked on, but she never imagined it was him. Never imagined the quiet, humble man sitting across from her was worth billions. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with awe. "Because I didn't want you to treat me differently," he admitted. "And honestly, I didn't want to ruin what we had. You see me as a person, not a paycheck. That's rare, especially for someone in my position." Evelyn shook her head, still trying to process everything. "Your money doesn't change who you are," she said firmly. "You're the same man who helped serve meals at the shelter, who painted walls at the community center, who listened to seniors' stories at the nursing home. None of that was about your wealth. It was about your heart." Daniel smiled, relief washing over him. "Thank you for seeing me that way. Not many people do." They finished their meal in reflective silence, the magnitude of his confession settling between them. As they left the restaurant and stepped into the cool night air, Evelyn turned to him with a determined look. "If you really want to thank me," she said, her voice steady, "then promise me you'll keep using your resources to help others. Not just here, but everywhere. Promise me you won't let the world harden you." He met her gaze, his own filled with gratitude and admiration. "I promise," he said sincerely. "And I'll always remember what you taught me, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touch." Their goodbye the next morning was bittersweet. Daniel packed his bags and prepared to leave, promising to stay in touch. Evelyn walked him to his car, hugging him tightly before he drove away. As she watched the taillights disappear down the road, Evelyn felt a pang of sadness but also pride. She had helped guide someone back to the light, and in doing so, she had changed not only his life but countless others. Though their paths might diverge, the bond they shared would remain unbreakable, a testament to the power of kindness, empathy, and human connection. And deep down, Evelyn knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was merely the beginning of something greater. Weeks turned into months after Daniel's departure, and life in the small coastal town returned to its usual rhythm. Evelyn went back to her daily routines, tending to her garden, mentoring teens at the community center, and volunteering at the shelter. But despite the familiarity of her days, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The bond she'd formed with Daniel lingered in her mind, a constant reminder of how one person could make such a profound difference in another's life. Then, one crisp morning, an envelope arrived in her mailbox. It was plain and unassuming, but when Evelyn opened it, she found a letter inside along with a bank statement. Her hands trembled as she read the contents. Daniel had set up a trust fund for her, a staggering amount of money earmarked specifically for her to use however she saw fit. His only request? That she continue doing what she loved most, helping others. Evelyn sat down at her kitchen table, the letter clutched tightly in her hands. She felt overwhelmed, almost dizzy, as if the ground beneath her feet had shifted. Accepting such a gift felt monumental, surreal even. She wasn't used to having access to resources like this. Her entire life had been built on simplicity and making do with what she had. What was she supposed to do with all of this? For days, Evelyn wrestled with the decision. She thought about declining the offer, insisting that she didn't need the money to keep doing good work. But then she remembered the countless times she'd wished for more resources to help people, to build affordable housing, expand educational programs, or provide better support for struggling families. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about what she could achieve with Daniel's generosity. Finally, she made up her mind. If Daniel believed in her enough to entrust her with this kind of responsibility, she owed it to him, and to herself, to honor his faith. With a deep breath, she accepted the gift, vowing to use it wisely and selflessly. The first project Evelyn tackled was close to her heart: affordable housing. For years, she'd seen families struggle to find safe, stable places to live in the town. Rent prices were climbing, and many people were forced to choose between paying bills and putting food on the table. Evelyn knew something had to change. With Daniel's funding, she partnered with local builders and architects to construct a new housing complex. The units were designed to be energy efficient and affordable, catering specifically to low-income families, single parents, and seniors on fixed incomes. Construction began within months, and soon the once empty lot transformed into rows of cozy homes surrounded by green spaces and playgrounds. Evelyn visited the site often, chatting with workers and checking on progress. She loved seeing the excitement in people's eyes when they toured the model units, imagining a brighter future for themselves and their loved ones. When the first families moved in, Evelyn organized a small celebration complete with food, music, and laughter. It was a joyous occasion, a testament to what could be achieved when compassion met action. Next, Evelyn turned her attention to education. Growing up, she'd always believed knowledge was power, and she wanted to ensure every child in the town had access to opportunities that would help them succeed. Using part of the trust fund, she established after-school programs focused on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, arts, and vocational training. These programs weren't just about academics, they were about giving kids confidence, teaching them teamwork, and showing them they had potential. One of the highlights of these initiatives was the Robotics Club. Kids as young as 8 worked together to design and build robots, competing in regional tournaments. At first, many doubted whether a small-town team could hold its own against larger schools with bigger budgets. But Evelyn encouraged them to believe in themselves, reminding them that creativity and determination mattered more than fancy equipment. To everyone's surprise, the team placed second in their first competition, earning cheers from the entire town. Evelyn also launched scholarships for high school students pursuing higher education. She understood the financial burden college could place on families, especially those already struggling to get by. The scholarships covered tuition, books, and living expenses, ensuring recipients could focus on their studies without worrying about debt. Each year, during the scholarship award ceremony, Evelyn gave a heartfelt speech, urging students to dream big and give back to their communities whenever possible. But perhaps Evelyn's most impactful project was the mental health initiative she spearheaded. After losing her husband and witnessing Daniel's struggles, she knew firsthand how crucial mental well-being was. Too often, people suffered in silence, afraid to ask for help or unsure where to turn. Determined to break the stigma, Evelyn worked with professionals to create a comprehensive program offering counseling services, workshops, and peer support groups. She converted an old building downtown into a wellness center, filling it with comfortable seating areas, private therapy rooms, and a library stocked with books on mental health topics. The center became a safe haven for anyone needing guidance or simply someone to listen. Posters around town advertised free sessions, encouraging residents to prioritize their emotional health. One evening, while tidying up the center before heading home, Evelyn overheard 2 women talking in hushed tones. One of them thanked the other for convincing her to come to the support group meeting. "I didn't think anyone would understand what I'm going through," the woman admitted. "But hearing everyone share their stories, it makes me feel less alone." Evelyn smiled to herself, knowing she'd played a role in creating that moment of connection. It reinforced why she did what she did, not for recognition, but because every person deserved to feel heard and valued. As word spread about Evelyn's efforts, donations began pouring in from unexpected sources. Local businesses contributed supplies, volunteers signed up to assist with projects, and even some former beneficiaries stepped forward to pay it forward. The ripple effect of her work extended far beyond the town, inspiring neighboring communities to adopt similar initiatives. Through it all, Evelyn remained humble, deflecting praise and redirecting attention to the collective effort behind each success. "This isn't about me," she'd say whenever someone thanked her. "It's about all of us coming together to lift each other up. That's how real change happens." Despite the accolades and achievements, Evelyn never lost sight of her roots. She still tended to her garden, baked cookies for the shelter, and spent hours listening to troubled teens who needed advice. To her, no task was too small if it made someone's day a little brighter. And though Daniel was miles away, immersed in his own world of philanthropy and rebuilding relationships, with family members he'd neglected for years, he stayed connected to Evelyn. They exchanged letters regularly, updating each other on their lives and sharing stories of the impact they were making. Their friendship remained steadfast, a beacon of hope and resilience. Looking back, Evelyn realized that accepting Daniel's gift hadn't just changed her life, it had transformed the entire town. From affordable housing to educational opportunities to mental health support, her projects touched countless lives, creating a legacy of kindness and compassion. Yet none of it would have been possible without the man who had walked into her life on that stormy night, broken and searching for light. In saving him, Evelyn had unknowingly saved herself, and together they had sparked a chain reaction of goodness that showed no signs of stopping. As she stood on her porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Evelyn felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Life wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in its imperfections. And she knew, without a doubt, that every act of kindness, no matter how small, had the power to change the world one heart at a time. Years passed, and the small coastal town continued to thrive under Evelyn's guidance. Her projects had not only improved lives but also inspired a culture of giving back. The affordable housing complex was fully occupied, its residents forming a tight-knit community where neighbors looked out for one another. The after-school programs were thriving, with students excelling in academics, sports, and creative pursuits. And the mental health initiative had become a cornerstone of the town's support system, helping countless people navigate their struggles with dignity and hope. Despite all these accomplishments, Evelyn remained grounded. She never sought recognition or fame. Her joy came from seeing smiles on people's faces and knowing she'd made even the smallest difference. Yet, as time went on, stories of her work began to spread beyond the town's borders. Local newspapers wrote articles about her efforts, calling her the heart of the community. Visitors from neighboring towns came to learn how they could replicate her model of grassroots philanthropy. Even national media outlets picked up her story, highlighting the ripple effect of kindness that had started with a single woman and grown into something extraordinary. Through it all, Evelyn stayed true to herself. She continued living in her modest home, tending to her garden, and volunteering alongside everyone else. To her, none of this was about being a hero. It was simply about doing what felt right. One crisp autumn morning, Evelyn received a letter in the mail. It wasn't unusual for her to hear from Daniel. He often sent updates about his life and thanked her again for the role she'd played in his healing. But this letter felt different. As she opened it and began reading, her eyes widened in surprise. "Evelyn," the letter began, "I've spent years trying to put into words just how much you mean to me. You saved my life, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. Because of you, I found purpose again. I reconnected with family members I thought I'd lost forever, and I dedicated myself to using my resources to make a positive impact in the world." He went on to describe some of the projects he'd undertaken since leaving the town, building schools in underserved areas, funding medical research, and supporting disaster relief efforts around the globe. Each endeavor bore the mark of Evelyn's influence, a focus on empathy, practicality, and empowering others to rise above their circumstances. "But no matter how far I go or how much I accomplish," he wrote, "I'll always carry a piece of your spirit with me. So I wanted to let you know that I'm returning soon, not just for a visit, but to stay. This town is where I found myself again, and I want to be part of the incredible work you're doing here. Together we can continue making a difference." Evelyn read the letter twice, tears streaming down her face. She hadn't expected Daniel to return permanently, let alone join her in her mission. But the thought of working alongside him filled her with excitement and gratitude. For so long, she'd carried the weight of responsibility alone, or at least that's how it had felt. Now she realized she wouldn't have to anymore. When Daniel arrived a few weeks later, the whole town turned out to welcome him. Word of his return had spread quickly, and residents lined the streets cheering as he drove through in a modest car, a stark contrast to the luxury vehicles he could easily afford. He greeted everyone warmly, shaking hands and thanking them for their hospitality. When he finally reached Evelyn's house, he stepped out of the car holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "You didn't have to do that," Evelyn said with a laugh, though her eyes sparkled with emotion. "I wanted to," Daniel replied, handing her the flowers. "Besides, I owe you more than flowers. I owe you everything." They embraced like old friends reunited after a long journey, which, in many ways, they were. Over tea on her porch, they talked about the future, how they could combine their strengths to tackle bigger challenges and expand their reach. Daniel brought fresh ideas and resources, while Evelyn provided wisdom, insight, and an unshakable connection to the community. Together, they launched new initiatives aimed at addressing issues like food insecurity, environmental sustainability, and access to health care. They partnered with local farmers to create community gardens, teaching residents how to grow their own produce. They organized beach cleanups, turning trash into art installations that raised awareness about pollution. And they collaborated with doctors and nurses to offer free clinics, ensuring everyone had access to basic medical care. Each project strengthened the bonds within the town, fostering a sense of unity and shared purpose. People who once kept to themselves now volunteered side by side, forging friendships and discovering common ground. The town became known not just for its beauty but for its spirit, a place where compassion and collaboration flourished. As the years rolled on, Evelyn and Daniel grew closer, their friendship evolving into something deeper. Though neither of them had planned for romance, it blossomed naturally, rooted in mutual respect and admiration. They shared a love built on trust, understanding, and a commitment to making the world a better place. On a quiet spring evening, surrounded by friends, family, and community members, Daniel knelt before Evelyn and asked her to marry him. His proposal was simple yet heartfelt. "You've given me a second chance at life. Will you give me the honor of spending the rest of mine with you?" Tears streamed down Evelyn's face as she nodded, unable to speak through the lump in her throat. The crowd erupted in cheers, celebrating not just their union, but the enduring power of human connection. Their wedding took place on the beach, with the ocean as their backdrop and the entire town in attendance. It was a joyful occasion filled with laughter, music, and heartfelt speeches. One resident summed it up perfectly when she said, "Evelyn and Daniel remind us that even in our darkest moments, there's always light if we're willing to look for it. They've shown us what it means to live with purpose, to care for others, and to never stop believing in the goodness of humanity." Afterward, Evelyn and Daniel stood hand in hand, watching the sun set over the water. Neither of them could have predicted the path that had led them here, from a stormy night on the pier to a lifetime of partnership and service. But as they looked out at the horizon, they knew one thing for certain: their journey was far from over. Together they had created something beautiful, a legacy of kindness, resilience, and hope. And though their individual stories might fade with time, the impact they'd made would endure, inspiring generations to come. As Evelyn leaned her head against Daniel's shoulder, she whispered, "We did good, didn't we?" Daniel smiled, squeezing her hand. "Yes, we did, and we're just getting started." And with that, they walked off into the twilight, ready to face whatever lay ahead, together.